Tonight at 6, 8 people, including a number of children, have been injured in a stabbing here in Southport on Merseyside. Armed police have arrested a 17-year-old boy. Police say there is no wider threat to the public.
We can't all go into hiding and feel unsafe with it, but it is terrible that it's children, young children.
We will have the latest from the scene here and from the hospitals where the injured are being treated tonight.
Also today, the Chancellor says there's a huge black hole in the finances inherited from the Conservatives, and so 10 million pensioners will lose their winter fuel payments. But Rachel Reeves is offering junior doctors in England a 22% pay rise over 2 years, plus an above-inflation offer for teachers. The former BBC News presenter Huw Edwards is charged with 3 counts of making indecent images of children. At the Olympics, a fight to the finish by Team GB's Tom Pidcock, who retains his mountain bike title with ruthless skill.
On BBC London, aiming to prevent a summer surge in youth violence. Is money from the Mayor for a package of holiday activities part of the solution?
Good evening from Southport on Merseyside, where there is shock and grief this evening after 8 people, including children, were stabbed in an incident just inside this police cordon. Now, what we know is that the victims have been taken to 3 hospitals, including Alderhay Children's Hospital in Liverpool, which has declared a major incident. They say that parents should only bring in their youngsters this evening if it's absolutely urgent. There's been an update from Merseyside Police just in the last half hour or so. They say that armed police arrested a 17-year-old boy. They've said they're not treating this incident as terror-related. They've said there is no risk to the wider public. So let's just go through what we know happened just before midday today. A dance and yoga event for primary school children was taking place near where this incident happened. Those injured were then taken to Alderhay in Liverpool, to Aintree University Hospital, and to Southport and Formby Hospital. Judith Moritz has our first report this evening, and I should warn you that some of the details you might find upsetting.
A sunny day in the school holidays, and children who'd been dancing moments earlier are lying in the street. Where there had been music, there was now the sound of screaming. Paramedics and police raced to them, local people too, including an off-duty nurse.
I checked in on my girls and I just ran to the crowd because I just thought, you put your NHS head on, don't you? And the mother that I was just consoling, just the look on her face because she knew something had happened to a child. It's like, oh my gosh, how do you even comprehend? There's nothing you can do.
The police were called by people working next door to where the primary school-aged children had been taking part in a Taylor Swift-themed dance and yoga class. They came across a graphic and distressing scene.
It was like a bomb had gone off. Just, girls' bodies all over the place. One of my colleagues that works with me, James, he brought one of the girls out of the building, and she didn't look good at all, poor kid. There was a few parents around. I've heard wailing and screaming pretty much all afternoon of parents coming later to pick kids up and only really finding out what's going on.
A major incident was declared, 13 ambulances sent and children taken to 3 hospitals. Firefighters raced there too to give first aid and trauma support, and police cordoned off a large area near to Southport town centre. In a fast-moving situation, armed officers arrested a 17-year-old boy at a village 3 miles north of the resort. Merseyside Police said they'd also recovered a knife. The incident is not currently being treated as terror-related.
I know the whole House will be very concerned at the extremely serious incident that has taken place in Southport. All of our thoughts will be with the family and loved ones of those who are affected. I have been in contact with the Merseyside Police and Crime Commissioner and the Merseyside Mayor to convey my support to the police and our thanks to the police and emergency services for their swift and courageous response.
Southport is known as a happy holiday resort, full of families, which always shows its best side in summer. Today, the community is having to come to terms with the fact that unspeakable horror has happened here instead. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Southport.
Well, some of the injured are being treated tonight at Alder Hey Children's Hospital in Liverpool. Our correspondent Elaine Dunkley is there for us. Elaine, what more do you know?
Yes, this is a truly horrific incident right at the start of the summer holidays. And what emergency services will have seen, heard and faced today will have been truly grim. 13 ambulances were sent and we know one child was airlifted to this hospital here. We don't know the exact ages of the children or the names of the children, and crucially we don't know the severity of their injuries and what condition the children are currently in at the moment. But what I can say is Alder Hey Hospital is in the top 20 of the world's most specialist paediatric hospitals, so those children will be getting the very best care that they can get here at this hospital. Alder Hey declared a major incident here early today and said that they were working with other services across the northwest. And they've also made a plea to parents not to bring children into emergency services because they're incredibly busy still dealing with this incident.
Elaine Dunkley, thank you for now. Well, our correspondent Judith Moritz has been here in Southport since lunchtime when we first started to hear about this incident. And Judith, I mean, a seaside town in the summer holidays, a sunny day, and people here just can't believe what's happened here.
It's surreal to be having this conversation with you, to be standing here, to be in Southport, which I've known, you know, in the north of England. This is one of the places, as you say, that you come in the summer to go on holiday, and we don't know the full circumstances of this situation. What we do know is that it involved children at the start of the school holidays, having fun, dancing. They've been dancing moments before this all happened. And it's the sound which really, to me, brings this home. They were dancing to music. You heard in that report that I produced just now the awful sound that locals here were met with when they came down to try to help. They heard screams, and a lot of them have said to us they don't want to appear on camera because they're so upset, but they've described that screaming sounded like nothing they'd ever heard. And now the silence. I mean, it's absolutely silent now, isn't it? And I don't think anyone here can come to terms with this right now.
People are just inside, at home, taking it in, looking after one another. Judith, thank you very much indeed. We're expecting to get an update from Merseyside Police in the next hour or so. You'll be able to get that on the BBC News channel and, of course, on the BBC News website. And if you've been affected by any of the details this evening, there is a list of organisations that can offer you support and help on the BBC Action Line website. But for now, from Southport, back to you, Reeta.
Thank you very much, John. Less than 4 weeks into her new job, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves has, in a major speech, set out her financial priorities and the resulting winners and losers. An inflation-busting offer has been made to junior doctors in England to settle their long-running pay dispute. But Rachel Reeves said immediate cuts were required to plug a £22 billion gap in the public finances, which she said had been covered up by the Conservatives. It means there'll no longer be winter fuel payments for all pensioners. From now on, they'll only go to those receiving pension credits or other means-tested benefits. Also scrapped a cap on the costs that older and disabled people pay towards social care. The reform had already been delayed by the Conservatives. Some infrastructure projects, including roads and railway lines, will also be cancelled, and government departments will be asked to make combined savings of £3 billion. Ms Reeves also announced pay deals across the public sector for teachers, the armed forces, police, prison staff and other NHS workers. We'll have more on the government's proposals to junior doctors and teachers in a moment. But first, here's our political editor, Chris Mason.
The words of the arguments of the past, the backdrop to the arguments of today. Rachel Reeves at her desk in 11 Downing Street this lunchtime, the first woman ever to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, and so have the keys to this place.
I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves.
Her big picture argument sounded like this.
The previous government let people down. Mr. Speaker, the previous government made commitment after commitment without knowing where the money was going to come from. They did this repeatedly, knowingly and deliberately. Today I am calling out the Conservatives' cover-up.
She said she would accept in full the pay rises recommended by the independent pay review bodies for public sector workers.
That is the right decision for the people who work in and, most importantly, the people who use our public services.
She hopes it'll mean no more strikes, and talking of which, the government has done a deal to give junior doctors in England a pay rise worth on average 22% over 2 years.
Today marks the start of a new relationship between the government and staff working in our National Health Service, and the whole country will welcome that.
Next, around 10 million older people will lose their winter fuel payment. Only poorer pensioners will still get it.
Today, I am making the difficult decision that those not in receipt of pension credit or certain other means-tested benefits will no longer receive the winter fuel payment from this year onwards.
A plan to cap the amount people in England pay for social care, due to begin in the autumn of next year, has been cancelled to shouts of outrageous from opposition MPs. And Rachel Reeves binned plans for a bypass in Arundel in West Sussex, a road tunnel near Stonehenge in Wiltshire, and also cancelled
the Restoring Our Railway programme, saving £85 million next year, with individual projects to be assessed through her review. If we cannot afford it, we cannot do it.
Sitting opposite, quietly seething, the man who used to do her job. Jeremy Hunt claimed the Chancellor had made a big mistake.
That great office of state depends more than any on trust. Yet in her first big moment, she breaks that trust with an utterly bogus attempt to hoodwink the public about the choices she has. Over 50 times in the election, they told us they had no plans to raise taxes. Now, in a U-turn that will forever shame this Labour government, she is laying the ground to break her word.
And there was this from the Liberal Democrats.
Will the Chancellor agree with me that it would be unfair to ask working people to pick up the tab a second time after they already suffered through years of painful tax rises?
And that is where the argument goes next. Rachel Reeves insists the main rates of income tax, VAT and national insurance won't change. As for other taxes, it does look like some of them will go up when the Chancellor stands on these steps on Budget Day in October. Chris Mason, BBC News at Westminster.
As you heard, junior doctors in England are to be offered a pay increase of around 22% over 2 years, after a deal was agreed between the government and the union, the British Medical Association. If accepted, it would end a dispute that's led to 11 strikes since the spring of last year. Our health correspondent Dominic Hughes reports.
What do you want? Pay restoration!
Since early 2023, there have been 11 separate strikes by junior doctors in England. Hundreds of thousands of planned operations and clinics were cancelled or postponed. For patients like Rosie, who faced a long wait for an operation on her shoulder, it's a relief to know the strikes won't cause further disruption.
They can actually get to grips with these waiting lists if they know what's happening, and they know that there aren't going to be strikes, and they can plan properly.
This long-running dispute has centred on pay. The doctors' union, the BMA, has asked for a 35% rise for junior doctors in England. The latest government offer is made up of a backdated pay rise for the last year of 4% on top of an existing increase worth an average of 9%. And for this year, an additional 6% increase, topped up with an extra £1,000. That brings the total over the 2 years to roughly 22% on average for each junior doctor.
We're recommending it to our members because it is a credible offer. It addresses inflation for the previous 2 years and shows that there is scope for the rest of the pay that's been lost to be recouped in the future.
A possible deal will be a relief too for hospital bosses who've struggled to keep services going through multiple rounds of strikes.
This dispute has been hugely disruptive to patients and its cost to the NHS. NHS leaders will be hugely relieved that the new government and the junior doctors have come around the table. We're on the route to resolution, but we really mustn't count our chickens because we know that the doctors still have to vote on this.
If this deal is accepted by BMA members, it could mark the end of what has been one of the most turbulent periods in the history of the NHS. In recent years, we've seen ambulance staff, physiotherapists, nurses, junior doctors, consultants and other workers all out on strike at various times. Now, GPs could be about to launch their own industrial action. We'll know more about that perhaps this week, but ministers will be very keen to avoid that if they possibly can. Dominic Hughes, BBC News, Manchester.
And the teachers' union says that further strikes are unlikely now that the government has made an offer of a 5.5% pay increase for teachers in England. The Chancellor also confirmed VAT at the standard rate of 20% will be added to private school fees from January next year. Our education editor, Branwen Jeffries, reports.
Schools are quiet for summer now. Before term ended, we spoke to teachers in Stoke-on-Trent who told us this pay award was about fairness.
The main reason why I went into teaching, because I wanted to give something back. I wanted to help the community. But there's got to be a balance somewhere between the government and the teachers to get it just right. You're doing a great job here.
When we told him today, he described the offer as fantastic news.
Over the last 14 years, experienced teachers' pay in England has taken a real hit over the cost of living, falling behind many other professions, and the unions want that gap narrowed.
This 5.5% award is above inflation. It is fully funded. That is what we have been asking for.
Does this pay award go far enough to avoid strikes this year?
Strikes this year are unlikely.
No education cuts!
The teachers' strikes were hugely disruptive to parents and the economy, settled when the last government found extra cash. Most schools have budgeted around 3%. The extra money is meant to fill that gap.
This is the one that's going to turn purple, right?
This secondary in Stoke has recruited from Canada and Jamaica because not enough graduates are starting teacher training here.
If you don't have a qualified subject specialist standing in front of the classrooms, you know that those kids aren't getting the best possible deal. And as a principal, that's not okay. We have to have our children get the best possible deal. We need qualified, high-calibre staff.
The government has promised 6,500 extra teachers in England. Today's pay award won't solve teacher shortages overnight. Branwen Jeffries, BBC News.
So what is the situation with public finances and how serious is it? Our economics editor Faisal Islam is here. Faisal.
Thanks, Reeta. So this was an unusual document published today, which is part pointing a finger of blame at the previous government and part mapping out the future of this Parliament. As we've been hearing, there's a list of unfunded spending pressures, including public sector pay, the asylum plans, including Rwanda, and the cost of the railways, leaving a shortfall of £22 billion in this financial year. All not fully accounted for, says the new Chancellor. And the independent forecasters, the OBR, suggested this could be one of the largest overspends outside the pandemic. The single biggest line item in this is public sector pay settlements. Those have all now been agreed by this government, which has accepted all the recommendations of independent bodies. You can see there, teachers, as we've been hearing, getting 5.5%, NHS workers getting 5.5%, armed forces 6%, similar elsewhere. Now, this is higher than the rate of inflation back in April of 2.3%. So that's above inflation, a real pay rise. That is not inherently abnormal, but it had been suggested by previous government that that could raise inflation. This new government says it won't be inflationary because, look at this, that's the average of earnings across the economy in the first quarter at 6%. So a pay rise for 2.5 million public sector workers after many years of squeezes. It costs over £9 billion, and that doesn't include the junior doctor settlement we've been hearing about. But the government thinks the public wants stability in the NHS and schools and an end to those strikes. Now, the new Chancellor wants to start to bridge the gap on spending immediately. So that means cuts to some major plans, unusually falling within this financial year. departmental savings of £3 billion to fund those public sector pay settlements. Winter fuel payment, £1.4 billion, taken away from 7 million households, and ending that Rwanda plan saves £800 million. All in all, that's a total of £5.5 billion in savings. So there is still a gap to fill of about £16 billion now. And while the Chancellor recommitted to her election promise not to raise the main tax rates, it's likely some revenue from other taxes will be required at the budget. At the heart of the validity of the black hole alleged in this document is whether or not this new government had any real choice over accepting the results of the public sector pay reviews launched under the last government. They could have rejected them, but only at the cost of significant strife in already under pressure public services. Reeta.
Thank you very much, Faisal. The former BBC presenter Huw Edwards has been charged with 3 counts of making indecent images of children. The 62-year-old resigned from the BBC in April after he was accused of paying a teenager thousands of pounds for sexually explicit pictures. Our correspondent David Silito is with me. David, Huw, a very familiar face to our audiences, of course. What do we know about what's happened?
Well, a statement from the police this afternoon say Huw Edwards was arrested in November of 2023 and charged on the 26th of June of this year on 3 counts of making indecent images of children. It's claimed a series of 31 photographs were found in a WhatsApp chat on a mobile phone, 6 relating to the most serious Category A offence. A conviction at Crown Court of possession of a Category A image could lead to a prison sentence of 3 years. Now, the offences are alleged to have taken place between December of 2020 and April 2022, and Huw Edwards, of course, did resign from the BBC in April of this year, but the BBC's highest profile, highest paid presenter hadn't been on air since July of last year. A court hearing will take place on Wednesday at Westminster Magistrates.
Thank you very much. David Silito there. The time is 21 minutes past 6. Our top story this evening. 8 people, including a number of children, have been injured in a stabbing in Southport on Merseyside. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested.
Medal in Paris. And meet London's all-female reggae stars still making music after 40 years in the business.
Team GB has won its first gold medals of the Paris Olympics, with Tom Pidcock retaining his Olympic title in the most dramatic of finishes in the mountain biking. Team GB also took gold in the equestrian team eventing, again retaining the Olympic title. Well, our sports editor Dan Rowan was trackside for the mountain biking. Dan.
Thanks, Reeta. Yeah, barely believable scenes here at the mountain biking course in Paris today. 3 years ago in Tokyo, Tom Pidcock claimed gold to win Britain's first medal of any kind in this discipline. Known as one of the most versatile riders in cycling, he arrived here at this 35-kilometre course in Paris among the hot favourites, but he had to dig deep, defying a puncher somehow to prevail after an epic tussle.
First possible time a puncher looked to have cost him. Pidcock almost 40 seconds off the lead and down in 9th.
Well, here he comes, Tom Pidcock, about to complete his 5th lap of this tight and twisty course, but he's up against it. That puncher's cost him so much time. Can he somehow fight back into contention and retain his Olympic title?
To give up, so give everything, and that's what I had to do. I knew that Victor was going to be super fast on the last lap, even if I couldn't get rid of him, so I knew it was going to be a big fight, and yeah, he left a gap and I had to go for it.
Could be set for yet more success. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Paris.
Well, earlier, Great Britain's first gold of the Games came in the equestrian team event for Laura Collett, Tom McEwen and Ros Cantor. It is a record 5th gold for Great Britain in the event, as Laura Scott reports.
Team gold! Jumping for joy, securing Team GB's first gold of these games. And
both wanted to come back and do again after the last experience. Has been incredible, but especially so because of the crowds here. I mean, it has been the most amazing feeling to be able to ride these special horses in front of these people.
In Saturday's dressage, they danced their way to an Olympic record, but an eventful cross-country day saw Ros Cantor penalised for knocking this flag. So they started today's show jumping with the hosts France hot on their hooves. In the lead, it all comes down to this moment. Laura Collett knows exactly what is riding on this round.
Laura Collins.
In this most iconic of settings, her horse, a damaging week for the perception of equestrians.
Those horses wouldn't perform if they weren't happy horses. It's a real challenge, and the horses, what they go through and what they do for us is second to none, and they're the real heroes here.
With back-to-back golds, these record breakers are riding the crest of a wave. Laura Scott, BBC News in Versailles.
Well, earlier, Tom Daley and Noah Williams took silver in the 10-metre synchronised diving. The duo finished ahead of Canada, with China winning the gold medal. Katie Gornall was watching.
Years ago, he was effectively retired. Here he was back on the big stage. His dive partner, Noah Williams, watched Daley on TV.
Yes! Get in!
Daley had his eyes on the prize.
Well, this is Tom Daley and Noah Williams' final dive here in Paris. We don't yet know if it will be his last at an Olympics. He's in silver medal position.
Deciding to come back, not knowing whether I would make the synchro team, let alone qualify a spot for the Olympics, and now to be here in Paris, diving in front of my son, who's just right there, I'd say, who actually asked me to come back. It's just so special.
For his husband, a Hollywood producer, you couldn't have scripted it better.
How are you feeling?
Sweaty. You know, you're going to do it to me again. I think we're all just very emotional because this has been such an impossible dream. A year and a half ago, we were in Colorado Springs awaiting the birth of our second child, and Tom and Robbie here saw this Olympic video in the museum. And Tom said, I think I need to do one more.
The silver medal is a first for Williams and completes the set for Daley. In his 5 games, he has won 5 Olympic medals, but he knows some things are more precious than that. Katie Gornall, BBC News, Paris.
Time for the weather now. Here's Sarah Keith-Lucas. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Rita. We've got some contrasts out there in the weather at the moment. For some of us in the south, it is hot, it's humid as well. This was the picture a little bit earlier on in Fairlight, East Sussex. And we're going to continue to see some hot and humid weather over the next few days, especially towards the south. It is cooler and cloudier further north, but for most of us, the next few days are looking largely dry. But are we going to be seeing a heat wave? Well, that depends where you are. This is the heat wave criteria, so we need 3 consecutive days above these given temperatures. That's 28 degrees for the London area, 27 for much of England and Wales, and we may well see that for some, especially through parts of the Midlands, central and southern England as well. So perhaps not just 3 consecutive days, but over the next few days between Monday and Friday, in fact, we could see 5 days above the heat wave criteria for some of us. Not everywhere. It is cooler across Scotland and Northern Ireland. We've got a bit more cloud there through this evening and tonight, with a few splashes of light rain, tending to ease out though as we head towards dawn. Further south, clear skies, and it's going to be another warm, quite muggy feeling night. So some of us not dropping below around 14 or 15, typically about 10 or 11 though, if you're across the north of Scotland. So that's how we start the day. Lots of dry weather on the cards once again tomorrow. There will be areas of cloud drifting around again across Northern Ireland, perhaps Scotland and Northern England. Further south across England and Wales, I think barely a cloud in the sky, light winds, and it's going to feel hot. 32 towards the London region, so that could well be the hottest day of the year so far. But we're typically looking at the low 20s or even the high teens across Scotland and Northern Ireland. And then we do it all again as we head into Wednesday. Another dry day with that strong sunshine. It's going to feel hot and humid once again. Just a small chance by Wednesday we could see 1 or 2 isolated showers. But again, high 20s, low 30s in the south, possibly high teens or low 20s further north. Rita.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That is today's BBC News at 6. You can, of course, keep up with all the latest developments on the BBC website. Now it's time to join our colleagues for the news where you are. Bye-bye.